I just came from outside. It is very cold. I can't even describe to you how cold it is. I'm freezing. I do not like this. I just don't like the extremes. I don't like when it's way too hot. I don't like when it's way too cold. Like, I appreciate balance. I can't understand people that say that they appreciate the cold or they like the snow. What the hell is wrong with you? This video popped up into my feed, piqued my interest. I was like, yeah, I want to see what she's talking about. Because, hey, you never know. You can actually learn from the other side, innit? So let's dive into this.
Hello, my dears. So recently, I've been seeing more and more articles of women who are in their 50s and 60s writing about how feminism or their feminist beliefs have negatively impacted their love lives. They write about experiencing a loneliness that they didn't fully anticipate when they were younger. And today we're going to be looking at 3 different women who shared their stories and discussed this because I think it could be quite interesting, and I definitely think their stories serve as cautionary tales for women who also want to have families but maybe are trying really hard to apply a feminist way of doing things, or trying to apply some of the feminist beliefs in the way that they try to conduct their relationships. So the first article is titled "I Regret Belittling Men. At 63, I've Ended Up Alone" by Kate Mulvey. So within the article,
I don't want to laugh, but that's exactly the stereotype of a cat lady, isn't it? She looked exactly like a cat lady. It's one of them ones. Once you reach a certain age, you realize that, bro, we are all in this together. I shouldn't be belittling people. And that's mainly what I see when it comes to these women. It's like they feel hurt. Someone hurt them in the past, and then they just project that to every single relationship that they have. Every single relationship, mind you. I'm talking about even in friendships. They will portray you an image of the common man as like a demon or something. I speak from experience. It's just something that I go through when it comes to my group of friends. It's just some girls will say they will demonize man. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Mulvey basically reflects that at 63, she feels as though she, quote, paid a hefty price for so-called liberation. She discusses how she came to the realization that her feminist beliefs may have contributed to her being single at this age, as she writes, quote, "I'm convinced feminism has ruined my love life." As a teenager, she was introduced to the women's liberation movement through listening to feminist mantras from figures like Germaine Greer and Betty Friedan, whom she says taught her to act like a man and demonize housework and the family. By her mid-20s, she had very strong academic credentials, and she says she was, quote, keen to flex her intellectual muscles and to never let the man get the last word. She also admits that she was very competitive within her relationships, with some of the men describing her as intimidating, scary, and opinionated. She also talks about how she treated a lot of conversations with men as like sparring matches, saying, quote, "I was treating every encounter with a man like he was my adversary." And she also admits that a lot of this was because she was scared of vulnerability, as she states, quote, "I long to be loved, but I also was too scared to be vulnerable. I was using my sharp mind to protect my all too soft heart against rejection." Within her article, she also recalls on past experiences that she had within her relationships and how she now sees why she was wrong to do some of the things that she did. For example, she recalls going on holiday with an ex-boyfriend. They went to Italy together, and she started speaking in Italian to the waiter. She states that she was oblivious to how she must have made her boyfriend at the time feel, as he was essentially just watching her having a full-blown conversation with this Italian waiter in the language that he didn't understand. And now looking back on it, she says she realizes that she was actually just showing off, and in the process of doing that, she was making him feel very small. She also acknowledges how in past relationships or past romantic encounters, she was also very dismissive of kindness, recalling one particular incident where a man gifted her flowers and she criticized him rather than accepting the kind gesture. Then when it comes to the sexual revolution movement, she also acknowledges the fact that she regrets the views that she had at the time about casual sex, saying that she had many one-night stands in her youth, but they often left her feeling very empty and used. And now
this is something that people won't tell you. Well, most people, because even guys will go through this. Not every single guy is a dickhead or a playboy, whatever you want to call it, a fuckboy. Mind you, someone has to break their hearts for them to go through that, for them to actually think that being with other girls and then using that as some kind of boost to go up in the hierarchy amongst their friends, amongst their group of friends, amongst the guys. It's something that guys will do as well because they don't want to feel vulnerable. They don't want to be left exposed. It's actually funny how people will mask their feelings, will mask how they actually will sort of apply like an umbrella to protect themselves. I don't think that girls understand this. Guys do this as well. They will sleep with other girls and they will feel nothing. It's all good and dandy for the first years of your life. Well, that came out wrong. I'm not saying in the first years of your life actually, but what I'm trying to say is that you're gonna reach that time of your life where that's not fun enough. You actually want to be with someone. And girls, I don't know, they think that we are not like them. We just want to go out there and fucking do whatever and whatnot. No, guys want to settle down as well. They want to build a family. They want to build something. They want to leave a legacy. But what we have now is people just lying to themselves because they don't want to be vulnerable to the point that the next person can use that against them. And a lot of guys have that problem as well, where they think that if they are vulnerable, emotionally vulnerable with someone, the girl, if it's a woman, obviously, they will use that against them in the future. I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but that's just shitty people. And that's just shitty people. Come on, man. You find that everywhere.
Looking back, she feels as though we very much devalued things like intimacy, connection, and all of these things when it comes to sex. And she thinks that that was not the best choice for us to do. Despite having a very successful career, she says that she's never been married, never had children, and the longest relationship she's ever had lasted 8 years. And she very much believes that her loneliness was partly as a result of the attitudes that she had in her youth. But now she says she's learned to take a step back and now understands that it's also okay to let the men in your life also shine. She does clarify though and say that it's not about dumbing yourself down or becoming a giggly male pleaser, as she says, but more so about just understanding the importance of balance. Then she ends her article with an invitation saying her diary is wide open. Go on, I dare you. Then the second article we're going to discuss is titled How Feminism Effed Up My Love Life by Lori Gottlieb. Now, Gottlieb starts her article with a very provocative assertion that feminism completely effed up her love life. But she does clarify and say, it's not feminism exactly, but what I consider to be a feminist way of doing things certainly didn't help. She says that her main problem is not necessarily feminism as a whole, but the distorted version of feminism that encourages women that they can have it all. The reason being is because she feels like it encourages women that they should be able to have everything in all areas, in relationships, in their careers, etc. It doesn't really allow them to have a realistic expectation in terms of what.
Yes, we shouldn't be doing this. Obviously, you should treat your woman well if you care for her. Obviously, that's what you naturally will want to do. But I think where we went wrong is putting them on a pedestal, putting them as the highest being. It's like someone that you need to absolutely adore and praise. Both parties should do that, because when you do that, it leaves space for the man to feel like, oh, okay, regardless of what I do, it's not going to be enough. Obviously, that's going to build this sort of message in your head and the way you see life. But at the end of the day, we need to remind ourselves that women and men are suffering from this. Because as you can see, as you can tell by these sort of case studies, they will tell you that women are suffering. They are alone. The term cat lady doesn't mean that they're happy. You can even claim that, oh, it's their own fault. They are in that situation because they did that to themselves. But at the end of the day, don't you feel sorry for them? Because they were lied to. They thought, because you need to just ignore everything that you know. Just look at them as a human being. They were lied to. They were absolutely indoctrinated to believe that this is the right way to go about it. That's harsh. To me, that's harsh. I feel sorry for them at the end of the day.
What they are able to have in their lives. She continues on to say that her generation were taught that in order to be empowered, they had to never compromise, stating, quote, "We grew up believing that we could have it all. Not compromising meant having high standards. The higher our standards, the more empowered we were." And she argues that this belief is what causes a lot of women, or a lot of women within her generation, to reject perfectly good partners, saying, quote, "In real life, you can't get everything you want, when you want it, on your terms only." And this view caused a lot of them to view dating as searching or hunting or shopping rather for the perfect partner, and looking at men as a package deal rather than as really human beings with their own individual flaws that they might have, but also good qualities as well. They had very, very strict superficial criteria of what they wanted from a man, and if there was anything that wasn't being ticked off on that list, they would discard them entirely. She also discusses what she saw.
I think this is a problem with social media and dating apps. For women, they have a plethora of options. So it kind of also gives them a distorted idea of what dating is. Because you see a lot of women thinking that just because they have a lot of guys coming to them, talking to them, trying to get to know them and whatnot, they will mistake that for having a bunch of options to have a relationship with or potentially marry with. And that's not necessarily the case, because a lot of guys are just talking to you because they want to get to your pants.
Often, which was this mismatch between the public feminist identity versus the private secret longing. As she says, quote, "Every one of my single friends wanted to be married, but none of us would admit how badly we craved it for fear of sounding weak or needy or, God forbid, anti-feminist." And I can completely understand where she's coming from. I mean, nowadays, if you express that you want any of these things, you're likely going to be called a pick-me, which is kind of similar to being called an anti-feminist, because whenever you're called these things, it implies that you don't like women, or you're betraying women because you're trying to appease or to pander to men. And this is something that Gottlieb actually acknowledges within her own article, as she says that aspiring for or wanting these more traditional ideals is often very much seen as betraying the feminist cause. Gottlieb describes the attitudes she saw as generational entitlement, women expecting constant passion, ideal partners, and immediate fulfillment from marriage, writing, "We don't wait to see if connection develops. If a relationship takes too much effort, we bail." With many single women acting like maximizers who held the belief that the longer you wait and the more you search, the better the guy is going to have to be. You don't want to have gone through all that struggle and turmoil only to end up with a good enough guy. But she acknowledges the problem with this mentality, as she states that often it does lead many women to leaving relationships with men who are good just because they're not quite perfect. And then in the end, what ends up happening is, because they have this belief that because they've been looking for so long, that the person they have to be with has to be practically perfect or the best of the best of the best, it causes them to actually be a lot more critical of the men that they end up trying to date, because they're constantly trying to see if they are good enough, and they are more likely to focus on their faults and find that the men that they date will never truly measure up to the picture that they have inside their heads, which is why many of them would end up ultimately just being single. She also warns that indecisiveness as well as perpetual comparison can also lead to unhappiness, and also creates this fear of settling that some women have. But she does also make a clear distinction between settling and compromising, stating that she doesn't think that you should just marry an awful person just for the sake of getting married. However, it's important for you to have realistic expectations and realistic goals for what you want for yourself within your love life. What matters is finding the perfect partner, not the perfect person, having reasonable expectations. She then also encourages women to search for important core traits like shared values, kindness, and responsibility, rather than hyper-focusing on this superficial criteria checklist. I also found...
I guess that's exactly the problem that we have today, is that many women will think beforehand of what you do, of what type of money you bring, what type of school that you went to. Like, they will ask you those questions before actually getting to know you as a person, as like, what type of human being are you? Are you kind and gentle? How are you with your family? How do you treat others? No, that's second, even third or fourth. I understand that people want to have a good life. Everyone wants that. But I don't know, man. It's kind of weird that women, mainly women, some women, I'm not going to generalize, some women will choose their partners. It's bonkers.
That Gottlieb, if I'm even pronouncing her name correctly, I really hope I am, but I'm trying, okay? I also found a really interesting interview that she did with Mary Claire, where she was talking about the problems with the feminist view of self-sufficiency. And she was talking about how she thinks that this idea of being super self-sufficient and hyper-independent is actually antithetical to a successful relationship, which requires interdependence and vulnerability. And so she very much argues that the feminist views about self-sufficiency are actually are misapplied applied in the context of romantic life. And for that reason, it doesn't really work. And the reason I found it really interesting is because it actually reminded me of a conversation that I had with a friend of mine. I remember in the earlier stages of her relationship where we were talking on the phone, and she was saying how she found that she had to let go of some of these feminist views that she'd had for many years, because we both went through that feministy phase in our lives, because she was very much a hyper independent girl, like very, very independent, wanted to do everything for herself. And so when she got into a relationship with her boyfriend, now husband, she was very much determined to prove to him that she could independently do things, independently problem solve, and that she didn't need him, but not in a spiteful way, just in a way of trying to show him that she wasn't a burden and she wasn't dead weight, you know, she could hold her own. Because to her, she thought that that would be an attractive trait. She thought that that would be something that he would like, when in reality what actually ended up happening was she ended up just making him feel as though, why was he really in her life? Because if she didn't really need him, then what was the point of them even being together? I think that's just because of the fact that for many women, including her at the time, I don't think we really understand just how much feeling needed is quite an important thing to a lot of men. A lot of men like to feel...
Every single guy wants to feel needed. I don't think I can convey this enough. Ladies, every single guy wants to feel needed. Just listen to that. Just the simplest things will make us feel happy. Asking us for help, just the simplest things. I needed to say this. I need to convey this. I got excited for a second. Sorry.
Feel needed, or need to feel needed. It is something that is quite important to them. And it's something that I don't think she understood at the time. And so it was kind of ironic in the end, because she was being hyper independent because she thought that would be a positive trait and something that he would like, but actually it was pushing him away, because he wanted to feel needed, he wanted to help her, he wanted to take care of her, he wanted to be all of those things for her, but she wasn't allowing him to do that. And so it kind of had a negative impact on their relationship as opposed to a positive one. But thankfully she was able to have the self-awareness to kind of realize what was happening there and kind of make some adjustments. But in also doing that, she realized that she kind of had to let go of some of these feminist beliefs that she had about, you know, how to conduct yourself in a relationship, and her views about independence and all of that kind of stuff, and the position that a man should take in her life, etc. And to be fair, they're now happily married, and she is absolutely so in love with this man. She literally glows when she talks about him. And it's just crazy to me to think that if she didn't have that moment of realizing what was going on there and wasn't able to course correct, then her outcome would have probably been different. Who knows if they would have gotten married? And that's such a weird thing to even think about now, because I can't imagine them two not being married. Like, they make perfect sense together, but they could very well have not been like that, because her views before were actually causing harm to her relationship. It is crazy how much this stuff can have a big impact on your outcomes, which is why I think it's important to talk about. But within the rest of her interview with Mary Claire, Gottlieb also talks about the fact that we need to kind of destigmatize women.
I actually think that this is the most important subject to talk about nowadays, because women need to be in the conversation as well. It shouldn't just be men in one group, in one space, getting like hate messages and putting themselves down and just go to the gym and then you'll feel better about yourself. Nah, man, that's not the way to go about this. We should be having a conversation. We need to be vulnerable with each other. We need to be honest, because otherwise this isn't going to work.
Women saying that they want to have a partner. You know, she emphasizes the fact that there's nothing wrong with wanting to be in a relationship. There's nothing wrong with wanting to have a partner. But yeah, we seem to have this kind of culture where if a woman openly outright says that she wants these things, she's kind of viewed in a negative way, to the point where, like she said before in her article, that many women within her generation didn't even feel comfortable saying to each other that they longed for marriage and longed for kids and family and stuff like that. Now, Gottlieb's message did unsurprisingly receive some backlash. She had some people accusing her of being an anti-feminist and also calling her shameful, arguing that she was basically trying to encourage women to settle down with anyone and to get married out of fear. To which she responded to by saying that she's not criticizing feminism as a whole, and she's also not saying that you should just marry and settle down with anybody, but she is making a point of discussing and challenging some of the feminist ideas that are out there that encourage women to believe that they can have it all without having to compromise on anything, because she does think that it can be harmful to some women when it comes to the impact it can have on their romantic lives, because of course if you're going to be in a relationship with someone, you're gonna have to compromise. So if you've got an ideology that teaches you that you should never compromise, and that's what empowerment looks like, then it makes it very difficult for you to be able to have a healthy, sustainable relationship. I also just find it really crazy that she was considered an anti-feminist for discussing this, because ultimately what she's doing is she's looking back on her life and she's reflecting on the choices that she's made that have led to the outcomes that she has. Quite clearly, she's not happy with the outcomes that she's had as a result of those choices she made in her youth. And so what she's simply doing is connecting the dots to understand how she got there, and is just simply spreading the word to other young women so that they don't repeat the mistakes that she's made. But I guess it would have been pro-feminist if she just kept quiet and just allowed women to potentially end up in the same situation that she's found herself in.
Yeah, I don't understand that mentality. A lot of guys will criticize women that will do this later in their years, like later in their life. I don't understand that. To me, it's just bonkers. Do you not expect people to grow? Would you think that people that go through, well, they'll make choices regarding to their lives, and then they'll get to the end, they'll be like, okay, that wasn't a good choice. Maybe I should convey to other people that are younger than me, don't do that. That's not good. How is that a bad thing? I don't understand. To me, that's just backwards. It's just backwards. People that think like that, people that will attack you for how you think, it's just, they're stuck. They don't have their own ideas. They don't understand that you can shift, you can grow. As a human being, you should grow. You should be changing throughout your life. They don't understand that concept. So yeah, I guess that's why.
I just find that really bizarre, because what are we classifying as feminist and anti-feminist these days? Because I see an older woman who's trying to help younger women by sharing wisdom, but yet somehow that's considered anti-feminist. Then the last article we'll be discussing today is by Petronella Wyatt, titled "Feminism Has Left Middle-Aged Women Like Me Single, Childless and Depressed." Within her article, Wyatt argues that feminism failed women within her generation because it taught them to prioritize their careers above all else, and in the process it's left them single and childless in their 50s. She describes growing up in a privileged background during the Thatcher era, and she remembers a time when she was in private school when Margaret Thatcher came and spoke to her when she was 13. And what she was told by Margaret Thatcher was that her career superseded any relationship she'll ever have with the opposite sex. At school, she remembers regularly being discouraged from pursuing traditional pursuits, as she would often hear things like, "Paulinas don't cook, they think." Again, Wyatt is not completely against feminism. She acknowledges the many successes and the necessary things that feminism did in the past, such as allowing women to have financial freedom, as well as also giving them the opportunity to access education and the workforce. However, she feels as though as modern Western cultures have evolved and changed, feminism also needs to evolve and change, because she does feel as though our current culture, in the way that it is now, has actually outgrown the old traditional feminist goals. And so she thinks that it's time for it to have a rethink and for it to adapt. A central part of her argument within her article is that middle-aged, single, childless women in her generation are deeply lonely. She cites a US medical study that identified loneliness as a leading cause of depression amongst middle-aged women. She also shares her own experience and how she's also struggled very much with depression, and how one time it was so bad she had to be hospitalized after some friends raised some concerns because she had impulses of very dark thoughts, and she had confided in a nurse that she had contemplated taking her own life. And she strongly links her depression to the fact that she was living a very solitary existence. And this isn't really uncommon, because I saw a documentary called The Birth Gap, and they were talking about how there's like a generation of older women in Japan who never had children, and the effects that loneliness actually has on them.
While we were filming, unknown to me, our production assistant Mie was talking to some locals. They explained how the week before, a 90-year-old woman with no family had thrown herself from the roof.
One man said, right there. She fell off because she was smiling.
Back near the station, I asked the store owner and his mother how often this happens. On a weekly basis, in this Tokyo suburb, old people were throwing themselves from the roofs, or their corpses were being found in their homes.
And so I do think we really do underestimate how difficult loneliness actually is, because we're so young. You know, when you're young, you know, your parents are still around, you still have friends who probably don't all have children yet, so their time is not really super occupied with family and obligations, etc. And, you know, you've got so many people around you, you've got your own community, so the loneliness is not really something you can comprehend when you're younger. But when you're older, that's really when I think a lot of people really feel it, and I don't think anything can really prepare you for it. Within Wyatt's article, she states, quote, "Much of my depression sprung from a solitary existence that would be eschewed by a race of alley cats. I do not know one single woman of my generation who lives such a life and actually likes it." She also discusses how her peers were taught to behave and think like men, something that she now describes as a fundamental mistake. Feminism made the error of telling us to behave and think like men. This error was a grave one. Women like myself are paying for it, like gamblers in a casino that has been fixed.
I just want to say something that I actually think that goes with what she was saying, that I think that once you reach a certain age, especially men, 30s, if you don't preserve your friendships, if you are a guy that doesn't have social skills, you feel much earlier than women that's that loneliness that she was talking about. And that's why I think that a lot of men are resentful towards women, because they are better than us preserving their friendships, their relationships. They are actually way better than us at doing that. So they will go beyond their 30s, throughout their whole lives, having a group of friends they will have deep conversations with. And that's healthy in a way to navigate life, because you have kind of a different perspective. And I feel like that's missing. That's what guys are missing. A lot of guys, because they will reach like the 28s, 30s, and they are lonely. They don't have no one to talk to besides their family. So I guess that's where the resentment comes from as well. It's not just that, but they see that women go out, that women have social gatherings, and they have things to do, and they are just stuck at home with their own thoughts. And yeah, that might make you feel some type of way.
She warns that the stakes for women are higher. In her view, living a single life involves more risk and higher potential loss than if one had followed a more traditional path. Ultimately, Wyatt argues for a cultural reset. She implies that feminism, or at least the dominant version that she was exposed to, needs rethinking to avoid repeating what she sees as damaging outcomes for future generations. And although she believes that it may be too late for herself and her peers, she doesn't think it's too late yet for younger women, which is the reason why she wrote this article. I do really think that this is a really interesting as well as an important conversation for the reasons I said at the beginning of this video. I think that if you are someone who wants to have a family, then it is important to consider these things and to also learn from the people who have lived a longer life than you, have tried out these theories and put them into practice, and seeing what their outcomes actually look like, so you can decide for yourself if that's something that you would be okay with. I also have a lot of respect for these women, because it takes a lot to publicly admit that you were wrong and to publicly discuss your regrets. Most people don't feel comfortable doing that, and I'm sure that they must have known that they were going to receive some backlash, and some of them did receive some backlash for what they wrote in their articles. Yet I'm sure they knew that was going to happen, yet they still did it anyway, because to them it was more important to get this message out and to try and communicate this with younger women than to just carry on and, you know, save face and pretend that everything is fine when quite clearly it's not. And so I do think there is a lot of kindness in what they've chosen to do by sharing their stories. I think the reason why feminism can create these outcomes for some women is because for many women, what has driven them to feminism is a fear of losing freedom, a fear of being oppressed, controlled, trapped, devalued, whatever it may be. And these fears aren't completely irrational. If you are the physically weaker sex, a defense mechanism to protect yourself is to fear the worst from men so that you can always be prepared for it, or you can at least try to actively try and prevent it. But this way of thinking also requires you to constantly be on guard and constantly be playing defense, which is not very good if you're trying to be in a relationship, because you need to be able to be open to connection, vulnerability.
The hell was that?
Oh, hi. Would you like a free gift?
Oh, hell no! That's hell no! Whoa!
To feminism is a fear of losing freedom, a fear of being oppressed, controlled, trapped, devalued, whatever it may be. And these fears aren't completely irrational. If you are the physically weaker sex, a defense mechanism to protect yourself is to fear the worst from men so that you can always be prepared for it, or you can at least try to actively try and prevent it. But this way of thinking also requires you to constantly be on guard and constantly be playing defense, which is not very good if you're trying to be in a relationship, because you need to be able to be open to connection, vulnerability, and you need to be able to have trust. And that's the complete opposite of being on guard and defensive. And so in the end, while these coping mechanisms may be well served in other contexts, when it comes to a relationship, it actually becomes quite self-defeating. Now, I know there will be people who watch this video and have similar criticisms for me and argue that because I'm pointing out the hardships that some women face for not having families, I'm over glamorizing marriage and family life and ignoring the challenges that can also come with that too. The fact that I even feel the need to clear this up shows how true it is that simply discussing or acknowledging that there are women who have regrets about not having a family is controversial to the point where I even feel compelled to make these caveats, but nonetheless, here we go. This video was never meant to be a generic video for all women. I don't believe that every single woman is going to be satisfied with a one-size-fits-all life structure. As I said multiple times within the video, this video is aimed at the women who do want family, they want to get married, they want to have children. If that's not you, then this clearly doesn't apply to you. But the reality is, even if a woman doesn't consider herself a feminist, these ideas are now so mainstream that many young women will hold at least one or a few of these feminist beliefs, and they could be negatively impacting their relationships without them being aware of it. Most people aren't prepared for the reality of what it takes to maintain a healthy relationship, because no one really prepares you for it. So if you combine inexperience with sabotaging beliefs, it's going to be a struggle, which is why I think that these women did a massive favor for young women by sharing their stories and sharing what not to do if you don't want to share their outcomes. Married life and motherhood has its own challenges too, I'm not going to deny that. But in the same way that you can find married mothers who go on TikTok to share their struggles with marriage or struggles with motherhood, or you'll find some women who make videos talking about why they don't want to get married, don't want to have kids, or why they're glad they didn't get married or didn't have children. There are also women out there who are silently struggling with the misery that has come as a result of them not having these things. They're not happy about the fact that they're not married. They're miserable about the fact that they never got to have children. And I think that they should be allowed to also share their experiences, and we should also be allowed to talk about it. This conversation needs more balance because it's very clear which experiences are socially acceptable to share and discuss and which ones aren't. But this double standard creates a lack of nuance and leads to young women only having a one-sided view, which makes them more likely to end up like the women who wrote those articles. The reality is, every choice you make comes with trade and trade-offs, and you have to make an informed decision about which ones you'd prefer to live with. But you can't make an informed decision.
I think that she completely hit the nail there, because the problem here is that you don't tell women that other side of the marriage. They feel fulfilled. The message that we actually have out there is that you'll be abused, your husband is going to belittle you, he's going to cheat on you. They will build this image around marriage that's like a prison. And obviously that doesn't sound appealing. But the matter of the fact is that this is important. That's how you leave a legacy. That's how we actually build something. Obviously, you can do that with money, but is that really? I don't know. Will people remember you? Maybe they will. I don't know. But I don't think there's nothing more satisfying of having like your family, having your grandkids, your kids, everyone together. I think that's the best feeling as a human being. I think that women should absolutely convey this message of, especially in her age, that they actually believe in that sort of ideology, that actually believed in this last wave of feminism. They should absolutely present us their message, their story, because how are you going to learn? It's just like I was saying in the beginning, this is the most important conversation that we can have. So it's really important that we talk about how we should deal with each other, how we have lost contact with the human side of things. It's easier to just shut down and blame the other gender for the whole thing. No, I can't even recognize what's my place in society. Like, I think that a lot of men identify with that idea, but I really do believe that we need to recognize that women are also going through it. Don't think that just because some of them are out there screaming from the top of their lungs that, oh, I'm independent, I'm strong, I'm this and that, that's not just a mask. So yeah, so I do think that this conversation has to happen, needs to happen, because like I said before, we need to learn how to navigate our emotions. Because you can see the downfall that this has on society. It is actually bonkers to me how the fertility rate just went down. It's just, I don't know, man. And the marriages as well, like, I don't know, it's weird. We need to get back together. We need to be, yeah, we need to sort this one out. But yeah, man, we're done. As always, thank you for being here. Have a good day. Take care of yourself.